The words came out of my son's mouth like poison, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. Go to a nursing home where you belong, old man. I stood there in the hallway of my own house, the house I had built with my own 2 hands 43 years ago, holding my suitcase like a beggar being thrown out into the street. My name is Raymond Carter. I'm 74 years old, and what I'm about to tell you changed my life forever. My son Marcus was standing in the doorway of what used to be my bedroom. His arms crossed over his chest like he was the king of the castle. Behind him, I could see his wife Shanice smirking, that same cold smile she'd been giving me for months now. The bedroom I had shared with my late wife Margaret for 38 years before cancer took her from me. The room where we had dreamed together, cried together, raised our only son together. Now it belonged to them, and I was nothing but an inconvenience taking up space. Marcus, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay strong. Son, this is my house. I built this house. Your mother and I. Was your house, Pops? He cut me off with that dismissive tone he'd perfected over the past year. Things have changed. Shanice and I need the space, and you're just taking up room we could be using. Besides, you're getting old. You can barely take care of yourself anymore. The lie stung worse than the eviction. I was 74, sure, but I could still walk without help, cook my own meals, drive my truck, and work in my garden every single day. My mind was sharp as ever. I balanced my checkbook to the penny every month, remembered every birthday and anniversary, and could still fix anything that broke in this house. But to Marcus and Shanice, I had suddenly become a burden that needed to be disposed of. I take care of myself just fine, I replied, feeling heat rise in my chest. And I've been taking care of you, too. Who do you think pays the utilities in this house? Who bought that new refrigerator last month when yours broke down? Who's been? That's exactly the problem, Shanice interrupted, stepping forward with her hands on her hips. You act like we owe you something just because you help out a little. This is supposed to be our home now, Raymond. Marcus and I are trying to build a life here, and we can't do that with you constantly hovering around, reminding us of how much you've done. I felt like I'd been slapped. Hovering around? This was my home. I had deeded the house to Marcus 2 years ago when Shanice had her first baby, my grandson little Marcus Jr. They had been struggling financially, living in a cramped apartment, and I wanted to help. Margaret had been gone for 3 years by then, and the house felt too big and empty without her. I thought having my son, his wife, and my grandchild here would fill it with life again. I thought we'd be a family under one roof. The deed transfer had been Shanice's idea, presented to me through Marcus with tears in her eyes and promises that I would always have a home here. Daddy Raymond, she had called me back then, her voice sweet as honey. We just need this to qualify for some assistance programs. You know how hard it is for young families these days. But this will always be your house, too. We're all family. I had believed her. God help me, I had believed every word. So I signed the papers, transferred the deed to Marcus, and continued living in my home just like before. Except it wasn't like before. Started small. Shanice would rearrange my things without asking. Then she started complaining about the smell of my cooking, saying it made the house reek. She'd leave passive-aggressive notes about keeping the bathroom clean, even though I'd been keeping that bathroom spotless since 1981. Marcus started asking me for money more frequently. First it was $50 here, $100 there. Then it was bigger amounts. Could I help with the car payment? Could I cover the insurance this month? Could I loan them money for furniture, for clothes, for vacations? I helped because that's what fathers do. That's what Margaret would have wanted me to do. Over the past 2 years, I had given them over $40,000 from my retirement savings and my pension. $40,000 I had earned working 46 years at the steel mill breaking my back in that hot, dangerous place so my family could have a better life. I had paid off their car, covered their credit card debts, bought new appliances when theirs broke, and paid for daycare for little Marcus Jr. so Shanice wouldn't have to work. And now I was being thrown out like yesterday's garbage. "The nursing home has an opening," Marcus said, pulling a brochure from his back pocket like he'd been planning this conversation. "Shady Pines. It's got good reviews. You'll have your own room, activities, people your own age. You'll be happier there, Pops." Shady Pines. I knew that place. It was the cheapest nursing facility in the county, the kind of place where they warehoused the elderly poor who had nobody else. The kind of place where my union brother Calvin had died alone last year, bed sores covering his back because the staff was too overworked to turn him regularly. The kind of place where they served the same gray meatloaf 3 times a week and called it dinner. The kind of place people went to die. "I'm not going to Shady Pines," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home." "Not anymore it isn't," Shanice said, her mask finally slipping completely. "The deed is in Marcus's name. Legally, this is our house now, and we want you out. We've been more than patient with you, Raymond, but enough is enough. We have our own lives to live, and we can't do it with you underfoot all the time." Patient. The word exploded from my mouth. "I've given you everything. $40,000 in 2 years. I paid for your wedding, your honeymoon, your car, your furniture, your son's daycare. I gave you this house. And you're calling that being patient with me?" Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable, but Shanice just stared at me with those cold, calculating eyes. "We didn't ask you to do any of that. You offered, and now you're throwing it in our faces like we owe you something. That's emotional manipulation, Raymond, and we're not going to stand for it anymore." I felt something break inside my chest. Not my heart. That had been breaking slowly for months. This was something deeper, something fundamental. It was the breaking of trust, of family bonds, of everything I had believed about the son I had raised. "I want you out by Friday," Marcus said, not meeting my eyes. "That gives you 3 days to pack your things and find somewhere to go. If you're not gone by then, we'll have the sheriff remove you." "The sheriff?" I could barely breathe. "You'd call the law on your own father?" "If we have to," Shanice answered for him. "But it won't come to that, will it, Raymond? You're a reasonable man. You'll do the right thing and leave quietly." I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of the boy I had raised. The boy who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read him stories. The boy who cried when he scraped his knee and only Daddy could make it better. The boy who had stood at his mother's funeral and held my hand so tight I thought my fingers would break. Both of us crying together. Where had that boy gone? When did he become the stranger who could look at his father with such indifference? "You got 3 days, Pops," Marcus repeated, then turned and walked back into my bedroom, their bedroom now, and closed the door in my face. I stood in that hallway for a long time, suitcase in hand, trying to process what had just happened. Shanice had already gone downstairs, probably to call her friends and laugh about how they'd finally gotten rid of the old man. I could hear little Marcus Jr. playing in the living room, innocent and unaware that his grandfather was being cast out like a leper. That night, I slept on the couch in the living room. They had already moved my things out of my bedroom 2 weeks ago, claiming they needed the space for a home office. I had been sleeping on this couch ever since, my 74-year-old back screaming in pain every morning, while they spread out in the master bedroom that Margaret and I had saved for years to renovate. I didn't sleep much that night. How could I? I lay there in the dark, listening to the house settle around me. Every creak and groan was familiar. I knew which floorboards squeaked, which windows rattled in the wind, where the roof leaked when it rained hard. I had fixed every one of those problems with my own hands over the years. This house was more than just walls and a roof. It was 4 decades of memories, of love, of life. And now it was being taken from me by my own flesh and blood. But as I lay there in the darkness, something else began to grow inside me. Started as a small spark of anger, then grew into something harder, colder. I had spent my whole life being the good man, the provider, the peacemaker. I had worked myself to the bone to give my family everything they needed. I had buried my beloved wife and carried on because that's what strong men do. I had opened my home and my wallet to my son and his family because I loved them and wanted to help. And this was how they repaid me, with eviction and abandonment. But what Marcus and Shanice didn't know, what they couldn't know because they'd never bothered to ask, was that I wasn't just some helpless old man with a pension and a little savings. My daddy had taught me long ago never to put all my eggs in one basket, and I had learned that lesson well. When I was 55, still working at the mill, a white lawyer named Mr. Patterson had approached the union about helping us set up retirement accounts. Most of the guys didn't trust him at first. We'd been burned too many times by white folks making promises, but Mr. Patterson was different. He was married to a black woman, Lorraine, and they'd faced hell from both sides of the color line because of it. That made him real to us, made him someone who understood what it meant to fight for your dignity. Mr. Patterson helped me invest wisely over the years. We put money into index funds, municipal bonds, real estate investment trusts. Nothing flashy, nothing risky, just steady, conservative growth. By the time I retired at 65, I had built up a portfolio worth over $800,000. Combined with my pension and Social Security, I was more than comfortable. I could have lived anywhere I wanted, done anything I wanted. But I had chosen to stay in this house, in this neighborhood, close to my son. I had chosen to live modestly, to save money, to be there for Marcus when he needed me. The $40,000 I'd given him over the past 2 years? That was less than 5% of my total assets. I could have given him 10 times that and still been fine. But I hadn't told him about the money. Margaret and I had decided years ago to keep our financial situation private. We'd seen too many families torn apart by money, too many children who suddenly became loving and attentive when they found out their parents were well off. We wanted Marcus to love us for who we were, not what we had. Now, lying on that couch in the dark, I realized we'd made a mistake. We'd raised a son who thought his father was just a poor old pensioner living off Social Security and a small retirement check. A son who thought he could discard me like trash because I had nothing left to offer. Well, it was time for Marcus and Shanice to learn a very expensive lesson. The next morning, I got up early, my back aching from another night on that couch, and I started making phone calls. The first was to Mr. Patterson's firm. He'd retired 5 years ago, but his daughter Jennifer had taken over his practice, and she remembered me well. "Mr. Carter," she said warmly when I explained who I was. "Of course I remember you. How can I help you today?" I told her everything. The deed transfer, the $40,000 in gifts, the eviction, all of it. Jennifer listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long pause. "Mr. Carter," she said finally, her voice tight with anger, "what they're doing to you is elder abuse, financial exploitation at the very least, possibly fraud if they coerced you into signing that deed under false pretenses. We can fight this." "I don't want to fight, Jennifer," I told her. "I want justice. I want them to understand that you don't throw away family like garbage. Can you help me with that?" "Oh, yes, sir," she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I can definitely help you with that. Can you come to my office this morning?" I arrived at Jennifer's office at 10 o'clock, walking through the same doors I'd walked through 20 years ago when her father had first started helping me. The receptionist offered me coffee, which I accepted gratefully. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from anticipation. Jennifer came out to greet me personally. She was a tall woman in her early 40s, her natural hair pulled back in a professional style, wearing a sharp navy suit that commanded respect. She looked like her mother, Lorraine, who had passed away from a stroke 3 years before her husband retired. "Mr. Carter," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "come on back to my office. Let's see what we can do about this situation." For the next 3 hours, we went over everything. I showed her the deed transfer documents, the bank statements showing all the money I'd given Marcus and Shanice, text messages where they'd asked for money, receipts for everything I'd paid for. Jennifer took notes, asked questions, and gradually built a complete picture of what had been happening. "Mr. Carter," she said when we were done, "I want to be straight with you. Legally, your son does own the house now. You signed the deed over voluntarily, and unless we can prove he defrauded you into doing it, that's going to stand. But there are other options available to us." "What kind of options?" I asked. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notepad. "Well, first of all, the $40,000 you've given them over the past 2 years. Were these gifts, or were they loans?" I thought about it. Most of them, they said they'd pay me back when they got on their feet. I got text messages saying that. Good. That makes them loans, not gifts, and loans can be called in. We can file a civil suit to recover that money. Second, you've been paying the utilities and property taxes on that house for the past 2 years. Correct. Every month, I confirmed. The utilities are still in my name. So are the property taxes. I pay those annual bills because Marcus said he'd handle the mortgage and I could handle everything else. Jennifer smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark spotting blood in the water. "Mr. Carter, if you've been paying the expenses on that property, you have a legal claim for compensation. We can file a lien against the house for unpaid rent because essentially that's what you've been doing. You've been renting out your property to your son at zero cost while continuing to pay all the operating expenses. That's worth money." "How much money?" I asked. She did some quick calculations on her computer. Rental value for a 3-bedroom house in your neighborhood is probably around $1,800 a month. Multiply that by 24 months, and we're looking at about $43,000. Add in the utilities and property taxes you've paid, and we're probably close to $50,000 total. And then there's the matter of your personal property in the house. What about it? Everything you brought into that house, everything you bought before the deed transfer, that's all still legally yours. The furniture, the appliances, the tools in the garage, all of it. If they're forcing you out, they need to understand that your property leaves with you. And based on what you've told me about what you've bought over the years, we're talking about substantial value. The living room furniture alone, the dining set, the appliances, all of that is yours, Mr. Carter. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not hope for reconciliation, that bridge had burned, but hope for justice. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "First, I need you to document everything in that house that belongs to you. Take photos, dig out receipts if you have them. Second, I need you to stop paying any bills associated with that property immediately. If they want the house, they can pay for it. Third, I need you to find a place to stay because when we move on this, it's going to get ugly. Do you have somewhere you can go?" I thought about it. I got a friend, Luther Washington. We worked together at the mill for 30 years. He's got a spare room he's been trying to get me to take for months now. Says he gets lonely since his wife passed. Perfect. Move in with Mr. Washington, get settled, and then we're going to hit your son and his wife with so many legal documents they won't know which way is up. Are you sure you want to do this, Mr. Carter? Once we start, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son may never recover. I thought about Marcus's face when he told me to go to a nursing home. I thought about Shanice's smirk. I thought about sleeping on that couch while they spread out in the bedroom Margaret and I had shared for 38 years. I'm sure, I said. Over the next 2 days, I worked like a man half my age. I took photos of everything in that house that belonged to me, which turned out to be almost everything. The couch I was sleeping on? I'd bought that 10 years ago. The refrigerator, the stove, the washer and dryer? All mine, purchased before the deed transfer. The dining room table where Marcus and Shanice ate every night? Margaret and I had bought that 30 years ago with our first tax refund after Marcus was born. The bed they were sleeping in? That had been our marriage bed, purchased in 1975 with money from my father's life insurance after he passed. The televisions, the lawnmower, the tools in the garage, the dishes in the kitchen, the towels in the bathroom. I had receipts or credit card statements for almost everything, carefully filed away in boxes in the basement because Margaret had been meticulous about keeping records. Marcus and Shanice barely noticed what I was doing. They were too busy shopping for new furniture online, talking excitedly about how they were going to redecorate once I was gone. I heard Shanice on the phone with her mother, laughing about how they'd finally be able to turn my room into a proper guest suite. On Thursday morning, my last full day in the house according to Marcus's ultimatum, a moving truck pulled up in front. Not a big truck, just a small one I'd rented for a few hours. Luther Washington came with me, along with his 2 grown sons, and we started loading my belongings. That's when Marcus finally noticed something was wrong. "Pops, what are you doing?" he asked, coming out onto the front porch as we were loading the couch. "I'm moving out like you told me to," I said calmly, "and I'm taking my belongings with me." "Your belongings?" Shanice appeared behind him, her eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, your belongings?" "Everything in this house that I purchased," I explained, nodding to Luther and his sons to keep loading. "The furniture, the appliances, the tools, all of it is legally mine, purchased before I transferred the deed to you. If you want me out, fine. But my property leaves with me." I watched the color drain from their faces as understanding dawned. They hadn't thought about the furniture. They hadn't thought about the appliances. They just assumed everything in the house came with the house. "You can't take the refrigerator," Shanice screamed. "We need that. We have a child." "Should have thought about that before you threw me out," I replied. "But don't worry. I'm sure you can afford to buy new appliances. After all, you won't have to pay for my food or utilities anymore. That should save you some money." Marcus stepped off the porch, his face flushed with anger. "Dad, this is crazy. You can't just strip the house." "I'm not stripping the house, son. I'm taking what's mine. Everything I'm removing, I have receipts for. Everything I'm leaving behind, you purchased or was here when you moved in. I'm being completely fair about this." "Fair?" he shouted. "You call this fair? You're taking everything." "Not everything," I corrected him. "You still have the house. The structure, the roof, the foundation. That's worth a lot more than some furniture and appliances. Of course, you'll need to start paying the property taxes, the utilities, the insurance, and the maintenance costs. I'll be canceling my name on all those accounts effective immediately." Shanice's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "The property taxes are due next month. That's $3,000. Better start saving," I said. We worked for the next 4 hours, loading everything I owned into that truck and into Luther's pickup. The furniture, the lawn equipment, the tools, the appliances, all of it. I even took the light fixtures I'd installed, leaving just the bare bulb sockets. It was all legal, all mine, all documented. By the time we were done, the house looked like a shell. Empty rooms echoed. The kitchen had no refrigerator, no stove, no microwave. The living room was bare floor. The dining room was empty space. Even the window treatments were gone because I'd bought those too. Marcus and Shanice stood in the doorway, watching us finish loading the last boxes, their faces masks of shock and disbelief. "How could you do this to us?" Marcus asked, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I heard something like genuine emotion in his voice. "We're your family." I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at my son. "Family?" I repeated softly. "Son, family doesn't throw each other out. Family doesn't look their father in the eye and tell him to go die in a nursing home. Family doesn't take and take and take while giving nothing back but contempt. You wanted me gone. Fine, I'm gone. But I'm not leaving you everything I worked my whole life for. You're 35 years old, Marcus. Your mother and I were younger than that when we bought this house, and we did it without anybody's help. Time for you to learn what it really means to be a man." I climbed into Luther's truck, my belongings safely loaded, and we drove away. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. Luther's house was smaller than mine had been, but it felt more like home than my own place had felt in 2 years. He'd converted his den into a bedroom for me, complete with a comfortable bed and a reading chair by the window. That first night, I slept better than I had in months. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. On Friday morning, Jennifer Patterson filed a lawsuit against Marcus and Shanice Carter for $43,000 in unpaid loans, plus $50,000 in unpaid rent and expenses, plus damages for emotional distress. We also filed a lien against the house to secure the debt. The legal documents were delivered by a sheriff's deputy at 9 o'clock in the morning. I know because Jennifer called me right after to tell me it had been done. "How did they react?" I asked. According to the deputy, Mrs. Carter screamed at him that it was a mistake, and Mr. Carter just stood there looking shocked. "They have 30 days to respond." "Mr. Carter, I have to tell you, I've been practicing law for 15 years, and I've never enjoyed filing a lawsuit quite this much." The phone calls started an hour later. First Marcus, then Shanice, then Marcus again. I let them all go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk to them yet. I wanted them to sit with the consequences of their actions for a while. The voicemails were something else. The first one from Marcus was confused, asking me to call him back because there must be some mistake. The second one was angry, accusing me of trying to ruin their lives. The third one was desperate, begging me to drop the lawsuit because they couldn't afford to lose the house. Shanice's messages were less varied. They were all angry, all accusatory, all blaming me for their problems. How dare I treat them this way after everything they'd done for me? How dare I take advantage of them? How dare I try to take their house? I didn't respond to any of them. Luther suggested I block their numbers, but I wanted to keep the messages. Jennifer said they might be useful as evidence of harassment later. 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello, Mr. Carter? This is Alice Sherman. I'm an attorney representing your son Marcus and his wife Shanice. I was hoping we could discuss the lawsuit you filed and perhaps reach an amicable settlement." "I'm represented by counsel," I told her. "You should talk to Jennifer Patterson." "I plan to," she said, "but I was hoping to speak with you directly first, person to person. Your son is very distraught, Mr. Carter. He feels this is all a terrible misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Ma'am, there's no misunderstanding. My son told me to go to a nursing home where I belong. His wife threw me out of my own house. They took everything I gave them and asked for more, then tossed me aside like trash. That's not a misunderstanding. That's betrayal." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Carter, I've reviewed the documentation. The amount you're seeking is more than the house is worth. If you win this lawsuit, you'll force them into foreclosure. They'll lose everything. Is that really what you want?" What I wanted, I said quietly, was to live out my days in peace with my family. What I wanted was respect and dignity. What I wanted was for my son to look at me and see his father, not an ATM machine. But I didn't get what I wanted, did I? Now they don't get what they want either. That's called consequences. Mr. Carter, talk to my lawyer, Ms. Sherman. I got nothing else to say to you. I hung up and sat there for a long time, my hands shaking slightly. Luther came in with 2 cups of coffee and sat down across from me. That the lawyer? He asked. I nodded. How you feeling? I thought about it. Sad, I admitted. Angry, tired, but also relieved. For the first time in 2 years, I feel like I'm standing up for myself. Margaret would have done this 2 years ago. She never took disrespect from anybody. Luther laughed. No, she sure didn't. Remember that time the foreman at the mill tried to pay you less than the white guys doing the same job? Margaret marched right down there and gave him hell for 45 minutes straight. He gave you that raise real quick. I smiled at the memory. Margaret had been fierce, a force of nature. She'd grown up in Alabama during Jim Crow and had learned early that you had to fight for every scrap of dignity and respect. She would have been ashamed of me for letting Marcus and Shanice treat me the way they had. But she'd also be proud of what I was doing now. 2 weeks later, Jennifer called with news. Marcus and Shanice's attorney has filed a response. They're claiming that the money you gave them were gifts, not loans, and that you gave them the house freely with no expectation of rent. They're also claiming you abandoned the property voluntarily, so you have no claim for compensation. Can they win with that argument? I asked. Not likely, Jennifer said. We have text messages where they explicitly promise to pay you back. We have utility bills in your name that you continued to pay. We have property tax records showing you paid those while they lived rent-free. And we have their own eviction notice to you, which proves you didn't abandon the property, you were forced out. Their case is weak, Mr. Carter. They're hoping you'll settle for less than what you're owed just to make it go away. I'm not settling for less, I said firmly. I didn't think so. In that case, we're going to trial. It'll take a few months to get a court date, but when we do, we're going to win. I'm confident of that. The next few months were strange. I settled into life at Luther's place, which was surprisingly easy. We'd been friends for so long that living together felt natural. We'd cook dinner together, watch the news, work in his garden. His kids and grandkids visited regularly, and they welcomed me like I was part of their family. It was the kind of warm, loving environment I'd been missing for years. But the lawsuit hung over everything like a storm cloud. Marcus and Shanice tried every tactic in the book to get me to drop it. They sent mutual friends to plead their case. They had Marcus Jr. call me crying, begging me not to take his house away. They even showed up at Luther's place once. But Luther ran them off his property with such fury that they never came back. The worst was when Shanice's mother called me. Mrs. Reynolds had always been cordial to me before, but now her voice dripped with venom. You're a cruel, selfish old man, Raymond Carter, she hissed, trying to destroy your own son's life because he asked you to move out. What kind of father are you? The kind who raised a son to be independent and self-sufficient, I replied calmly. Something you apparently failed to teach your daughter. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have nothing more to say to you. The trial date was set for early March, 5 months after I'd been evicted. Jennifer prepared meticulously, organizing every document, every receipt, every text message. She deposed Marcus and Shanice separately, and from what she told me, their stories contradicted each other in several key places. Marcus is trying to play the victim, she said. He's claiming you pressured him into accepting your money and that he felt obligated to take it. Shanice, on the other hand, is claiming you offered the money freely and that they never asked for any of it. Their stories don't match, which makes them both look like liars. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Marcus as a boy, about all the times I taught him to ride a bike, to throw a football, to fix a car engine. I thought about his high school graduation, his college graduation, his wedding day. I thought about holding Marcus Jr. for the first time, tears in my eyes as I looked at my grandson. Where had it all gone wrong? At what point had my son stopped seeing me as a father and started seeing me as a resource to be exploited? The trial was held in a small courtroom in the county courthouse. I arrived early with Luther and Jennifer, and we took our seats at the plaintiff's table. Marcus and Shanice arrived shortly after with their attorney, Ms. Sherman. They didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence. They just sat down and stared straight ahead. The judge was a black woman in her 60s named Judge Matthews. She had a reputation for being fair but tough, and she didn't tolerate nonsense in her courtroom. The trial lasted 3 days. Jennifer presented our case methodically, walking the judge through every transaction, every text message, every receipt. She showed that I had loaned Marcus and Shanice over $40,000 with explicit promises of repayment. She showed that I had continued to pay property taxes, utilities, and maintenance on the house for 2 years after transferring the deed. She calculated the fair market rent value and demonstrated that Marcus and Shanice had received over $50,000 in value by living rent-free in my property while I paid all the expenses. She also called me to testify. I told the truth about everything. About transferring the deed because I wanted to help my son. About the $40,000 in loans. About being told to go to a nursing home. About being evicted from my own house. About watching my property being stripped away by my own son. Mr. Carter, Jennifer asked me on the stand, do you love your son? Yes, ma'am, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I love him more than my own life. That's why this hurts so much. I didn't do all this out of obligation. I did it because I love him and wanted to help him. And he repaid that love by throwing me away. I saw Marcus flinch at that, but he still didn't look at me. Marcus and Shanice testified too. Their attorney tried to paint me as a controlling, manipulative father who used money to maintain power over his son. Marcus claimed I had pressured him into accepting the money, that he'd felt obligated because I was his father. Shanice claimed I had been difficult to live with, that I had created a hostile environment in their home. During cross-examination, Jennifer tore their testimony apart. Mr. Carter, she said to Marcus, you testified that your father pressured you into accepting money. Is that correct? Yes, Marcus said quietly. Can you point to a single instance where he threatened you or coerced you into taking money? Well, not threatened exactly, but did he threaten to cut off contact if you didn't take the money? No. Did he threaten to harm you in any way if you didn't take the money? No. So when you say he pressured you, what you really mean is that he offered you money and you accepted it freely, correct? Marcus squirmed in his seat. I guess. Jennifer went through the text messages one by one, showing where Marcus had asked for money, where he'd promised to pay it back, where he'd thanked his father for the help. By the time she was done, it was clear that Marcus had not been pressured into anything. He'd asked for the money willingly and accepted it gratefully. Shanice didn't fare much better. Jennifer got her to admit that she'd been the one who suggested the deed transfer. She got her to admit that they'd never paid rent or contributed to any household expenses. She got her to admit that she'd told me to go to a nursing home. Mrs. Carter, Jennifer said, you testified that Mr. Carter created a hostile environment in your home. Can you give specific examples? He was always watching us, always judging us, Shanice said defensively. He'd make comments about how we spent money, about how we raised Marcus Jr. It was constant criticism. Did he ever yell at you? Well, no, but did he ever threaten you? No. Did he ever refuse to let you live your life as you chose? He made us feel guilty all the time. By existing in his own house? Jennifer asked pointedly. Mrs. Carter, isn't it true that you wanted Mr. Carter out of the house so you could have full control of the property? That's not. Isn't it true that you saw him as an obstacle to your comfort? We just needed our own space. Space in his house. The house he built. The house he paid for. The house he continued to pay expenses on even after deeding it to your husband. Shanice couldn't answer that. On the third day, both sides gave their closing arguments. Ms. Sherman argued that the money had been gifts freely given, that the deed transfer had been voluntary, and that Marcus and Shanice owed me nothing. She painted me as a bitter old man trying to punish his son for wanting independence. Jennifer's closing argument was devastating. Your Honor, she began, this case is about elder abuse, financial exploitation. A son and daughter-in-law who saw an elderly man not as a father, not as a grandfather, not as a human being worthy of respect, but as a source of money to be drained dry and then discarded. The evidence is overwhelming. Text messages promising repayment. Utility bills paid month after month. Property taxes paid year after year. And when Raymond Carter had finally given everything he could, when there was nothing left to take, they told him to go to a nursing home where he belonged. She paused, letting that sink in. The defendants want this court to believe that a man who worked 46 years in a steel mill, who built a house with his own hands, who raised a son alone after his wife died, that this man is somehow the villain in this story. But the evidence tells a different tale. The evidence shows a father who loved his son too much, who gave too freely, who trusted too completely, and who was betrayed in the cruelest way possible. Jennifer walked over to the defendant's table and looked directly at Marcus and Shanice. These defendants took $40,000 in loans they never intended to repay. They lived rent-free in a house worth over $150,000 while the owner paid all the expenses. They received over $90,000 in total value, and when they were done taking, they threw the man who gave it to them out on the street. Your Honor, I'm asking this court to send a clear message that elder abuse will not be tolerated, that you cannot exploit your parents financially and then discard them like trash. I'm asking for judgment in favor of Mr. Raymond Carter for the full amount claimed, plus interest, plus court costs. Judge Matthews took a recess to consider her ruling. Luther and I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, neither of us speaking. After 45 minutes that felt like 45 hours, the bailiff called us back in. Judge Matthews looked stern as she took her seat. She shuffled through some papers, then looked up at both tables. I've reviewed all the evidence and testimony in this case, she began. And I want to say something before I give my ruling. I've been on the bench for 18 years, and I've seen a lot of family disputes. But this case troubles me deeply. She turned to look at Marcus and Shanice. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, what you did to this man is shameful. He is your father. He is your family. And you treated him like a bank account with an expiration date. The evidence clearly shows that the money he gave you were loans, not gifts. The text messages are explicit about that. The evidence also clearly shows that you lived rent-free in his property while he continued to pay all expenses, which creates a legal obligation on your part to compensate him for that benefit. Shanice started to cry, but Judge Matthews wasn't done. I'm particularly disturbed by the testimony regarding how you evicted him from the home. Telling an elderly man to go to a nursing home where he belongs? That's not just cruel, Mrs. Carter. That's abusive. And you did this to a man who had given you everything, who had supported you financially for years, who had deeded you his home out of love and trust. The judge turned to her paperwork. Therefore, I find in favor of the plaintiff, Raymond Carter. The defendants are ordered to pay $43,000 for unpaid loans, $50,000 for unpaid rent and expenses, and an additional $10,000 in punitive damages for elder financial abuse. Total judgment, $103,000, plus court costs and interest. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. Shanice let out a wail. Marcus just put his head in his hands. Miss Sherman immediately stood up to request a stay or a payment plan, but Judge Matthews cut her off. The defendants have 30 days to satisfy this judgment. If they cannot pay, the plaintiff has the right to execute on the property to satisfy the debt. This court is adjourned. I sat there in stunned silence. I'd won. I'd actually won. Jennifer was grinning from ear to ear as she packed up her files. Mr. Carter, that was one of the most satisfying verdicts I've ever gotten. Judge Matthews doesn't usually award punitive damages. She wanted to send a message. What happens now? I asked. Now they have 30 days to come up with $103,000. If they can't, you can force the sale of the house to satisfy the judgment. Based on what I know about their finances, they won't be able to pay. They'll have to sell or refinance. As we walked out of the courtroom, Marcus suddenly appeared in front of me. His face was red and blotchy from crying, and he looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "Dad, please. We don't have that kind of money. If you execute on the house, we'll lose everything. Little Marcus will lose his home. Please, you can't do this to us." I looked at my son, really looked at him, for the first time in months. I saw the boy I'd raised, yes, but I also saw the man he'd become. A man who had taken advantage of his father's love. A man who had thrown his father away when there was nothing left to take. A man who was only showing remorse now that there were consequences. "Marcus," I said quietly, "when you told me to go to a nursing home, did you think about what would happen to me? Did you care that I'd be alone in some facility where nobody knew my name? Did you consider that I'd built that house with my own hands, that every room held memories of your mother? Dad, when you took my money month after month, did you ever think about paying it back? Did you ever think about whether I might need that money for my own expenses, my own life? Or did you just see me as an endless well that would never run dry?" Marcus couldn't meet my eyes. "You taught me something, son," I continued. "You taught me that blood doesn't always mean family, that sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones you love the most, that love without respect is worthless." "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. We were wrong. We treated you terribly, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But please don't take our house. Don't do this to your grandson. He's innocent in all of this." I felt something crack inside my chest. Little Marcus Jr. was innocent. He was just a child caught in the middle of adult problems. And despite everything, I loved that boy. "I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Marcus," I said. "I'm going to give you a choice. You have 30 days to pay me $103,000, which we both know you don't have. Or you can sign the deed back to me, move out of the house within 60 days, and I'll forgive the entire debt. The house for the money. That's the deal." Marcus stared at me in shock. "You want us to give up the house?" "I want my house back, yes. The house you only got because I loved you and wanted to help you. The house you threw me out of. That house. You give it back to me, clean title, no arguments, and you walk away debt-free. You keep the $40,000 I loaned you. You don't owe me anything for the 2 years of rent and expenses. You start fresh, just like you wanted. You just don't get to start fresh in my house." Shanice appeared behind Marcus, her makeup streaked down her face. "That house is worth $150,000. You're asking us to give up $50,000 in equity. No, I corrected her. I'm asking you to give up $0 in equity. You put $0 into that house. I built it. I maintained it. I paid for it. The only reason you have any equity at all is because I gave you the house out of love. Now I'm taking it back. You can either do this voluntarily and walk away clean, or I can execute on the judgment and force a sale. If I force a sale, you'll get whatever is left after my judgment is satisfied, after the real estate commissions, after the court costs. That'll probably be nothing. This way, at least you walk away with the $40,000 and no debt hanging over your heads. You're a heartless bastard, Shanice spat. No, Mrs. Carter, Jennifer interjected. He's a man who has been financially abused and is now exercising his legal rights. And I'd suggest you watch your tone before you find yourself facing additional legal action for harassment. Marcus grabbed Shanice's arm before she could say anything else. We'll think about it, he said to me. We have 30 days, right? 30 days, I confirmed. After that, the choice gets made for you. We left the courthouse separately. Luther drove me back to his place in silence. When we got inside, he poured us each 2 fingers of bourbon, and we sat in his living room staring at the wall. You did the right thing, Luther finally said. Did I? I asked. I just gave my son an ultimatum that's going to make him homeless. No, you gave your son a choice, and you were more than fair about it. Raymond, that boy took advantage of you for years. He treated you like dirt. He threw you out of your own house. You don't owe him anything. He's my son, Luther. I know, brother. I know. But sometimes our children need to learn the hard way. My daughter stole from me 10 years ago, forged my name on checks, cleaned out my savings. You remember that? I nodded. I remembered. I had her arrested. My own daughter. It broke my heart, but I did it because she needed to learn that there are consequences for your actions. She went to jail for 6 months, got clean, got her life together. Now she's got a good job, 2 beautiful kids, and we have a real relationship. But none of that would have happened if I'd just let it slide, if I'd kept enabling her. You think Marcus will learn? Maybe, maybe not. But at least you'll have your dignity back, your house back, your life back. Over the next 30 days, Marcus and Shanice tried everything to change my mind. They had friends call me. They had family members plead with me. They even had their pastor reach out, trying to appeal to my Christian charity. But I stood firm. On day 28, 2 days before the deadline, Marcus called me. Dad, we'll take the deal. We'll sign the house back to you. Ms. Sherman is drawing up the papers. Can we have 60 days to find a new place and move out? 60 days, I agreed. And Marcus? I'm waiving the back rent and the loan repayment. But I want every piece of furniture, every appliance, every item I removed from that house returned. You've been living with my property for 5 months now. Time to give it back. There was a long pause. Dad, we sold some of that stuff. The couch, the dining table. We needed the money for legal fees. My blood ran cold. You sold my property? The couch your mother and I bought together? The table we ate at as a family for 30 years. We didn't have a choice, Marcus said defensively. The legal bills were piling up and we find a way to replace what you sold, Marcus. Same quality, same value. Or I'll add it to the list of things you owe me and we'll go back to court. Your choice. I hung up before he could argue. The deed transfer happened 30 days later at Jennifer's office. Marcus and Shanice signed the papers without saying a word to me. Their faces were hard, their eyes empty. When it was done, Jennifer notarized the documents and handed me the deed. Congratulations, Mr. Carter, she said. You're the legal owner of your home again. I looked at the paper in my hands, at my name on the deed, and I felt empty. I'd won, but it didn't feel like a victory. Felt like a funeral. Marcus and Shanice moved out over the next 60 days. They took the furniture they'd purchased and left behind the items they'd sold, along with checks for the replacement value. They didn't say goodbye. They just loaded their things into a rental truck one Saturday morning and drove away. Little Marcus Jr. waved at me from the truck window as they left. I waved back, tears streaming down my face. Luther helped me move back into my house. We spent a week cleaning it from top to bottom, erasing every trace of Marcus and Shanice's occupancy. I replaced the locks, repaired the damage they'd done, and slowly turned it back into the home it had been before. I also made some changes. I turned Marcus's old bedroom into an art studio. Margaret had always wanted me to pursue painting, but I'd never had the time. Now I had nothing but time. I turned the spare bedroom into a proper guest room for when Luther's grandkids visited, because he'd become like family to me now, closer than my own blood. 6 months after I moved back into my house, I was working in the garden when a car pulled up. I looked up, my heart racing, thinking maybe Marcus had come to apologize, to try to rebuild what we'd broken. But it wasn't Marcus. It was a young woman I didn't recognize, maybe 30 years old, dressed professionally in a suit. She got out of the car and walked up my driveway with a tentative smile. "Mr. Carter? Mr. Raymond Carter." "That's me," I said, wiping dirt off my hands. "My name is Keisha Washington. I'm a social worker with the county. I was hoping I could talk to you for a few minutes." My blood went cold. Had Marcus reported me to social services? Was this some new attack? "What's this about?" I asked cautiously. "I've been working with a family who mentioned your name. Marcus and Shanice Carter? They listed you as next of kin. I haven't spoken to them in months," I said. "What's happened? Is little Marcus okay?" Keisha's face softened. "The child is fine, Mr. Carter. But your son and daughter-in-law have fallen on hard times. They couldn't afford rent after they left here, and they ended up in a homeless shelter. They've been there for about 3 months now." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Homeless? But Marcus has a job. He's a manager at the warehouse. He lost that job about 4 months ago. Something about multiple absences. I think the stress of everything got to him. He's been trying to find work, but it's been difficult. Shanice works part-time at a grocery store, but it's not enough to afford rent anywhere. I sat down heavily on my porch steps. My son was homeless. My grandson was living in a shelter. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because they need help, Mr. Carter. I've been trying to get them into transitional housing, but the wait lists are long. They mentioned that you own this house, and I thought maybe—" "No," I said firmly. "No, I'm not letting them move back in here. That ship has sailed." "I'm not asking you to let them move in," Keisha said gently. "But Mr. Carter, that little boy is your grandson. He's living in a shelter with 40 other people. He sleeps on a cot. He doesn't have his own toys or books or space. He's 3 years old, and this is his life right now." The guilt hit me like a wave. I thought about Marcus Jr., innocent and sweet, caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly. "I don't want anything from you, Mr. Carter. I'm just informing you of the situation. What you choose to do with that information is up to you. But I will say this. I've worked with a lot of families over the years, and I've found that children do better when they have family support, even when their parents have made mistakes." She handed me a card with her contact information and walked back to her car. I sat on those porch steps for a long time after she left, thinking. That night I called Jennifer. "Raymond," she said warmly, "how are you settling back into the house?" "It's good," I said. "Listen, Jennifer, I need your advice. Marcus and Shanice are homeless. They're in a shelter with my grandson. And I'm trying to figure out what, if anything, I should do about it. There was a long pause. Raymond, you don't owe them anything. The court settled that. You won. You don't have to help them. I know I don't have to, but should I? Little Marcus didn't do anything wrong. Should he suffer because his parents are idiots? What are you thinking about doing? I don't know yet, but I need to do something. I can't sleep knowing my grandson is living in a shelter. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. If you want to help, help the child, not the parents. Set up boundaries. Make it clear that this is for Marcus Jr., not for them. And for God's sake, Raymond, protect yourself legally. If you're going to do this, we need to do it right. Over the next few days, I thought long and hard about what to do. I prayed about it. I talked to Luther about it. I sat in my house, surrounded by memories of Margaret, and tried to imagine what she would want me to do. Finally, I made my decision. I called Keisha Washington and told her I wanted to help, but on my terms. She arranged a meeting at her office with Marcus and Shanice. When I walked into that conference room, I barely recognized my son. He'd lost weight. His clothes were worn and dirty, and his eyes had a hollow look I'd never seen before. Shanice looked even worse, her hair unwashed, her face gaunt. They both looked up when I entered, and I saw hope flicker in their eyes. Dad, Marcus started, but I held up my hand. I'm not here for you, I said bluntly. I'm here for my grandson. Keisha tells me he's living in a shelter, and that's not acceptable. We're doing the best we can, Shanice said defensively. Your best isn't good enough, I replied. That boy deserves better. So here's what's going to happen. I own a small rental property on the east side of town, a 2-bedroom apartment. You can live there rent-free for 1 year while you get back on your feet. Marcus's face lit up. Dad, thank you. I'm not done. I cut him off. There are conditions. First, Marcus, you will find a job within 30 days, any job, and you will keep it. Second, Shanice, you will go back to school or get training for better employment. Third, you will both attend financial counseling sessions that I will arrange and pay for. Fourth, you will allow me regular visitation with my grandson. And fifth, at the end of 1 year, you will either be able to afford market rent for that apartment, or you will move somewhere you can afford. This is not permanent. This is a hand up, not a handout. What if we can't find jobs? Shanice asked. Then you move into the shelter permanently, and I'll pursue custody of Marcus Jr. I'm 74 years old, but I'm more capable of providing a stable home than you two have proven to be. The threat was clear. This was their last chance. There's one more condition, I added. You will never, ever ask me for money again. Not a dollar, not a dime. I will pay for the apartment and the financial counseling because that's for my grandson's benefit. But beyond that, you're on your own. If you violate any of these conditions, the deal is off and you're out. Am I clear? They both nodded, tears streaming down their faces. I'm clear, Dad, Marcus said. Thank you. Thank you so much. I promise we'll do better. Don't promise me, I said. Show me. Jennifer drew up a formal agreement outlining all the conditions. Marcus and Shanice signed it without argument. 2 days later, I gave them the keys to the apartment and watched them move in with the few possessions they had left. I didn't stay to help them unpack. I just made sure little Marcus Jr. had a safe place to sleep. Then I left. Over the next year, I watched from a distance as Marcus and Shanice slowly rebuilt their lives. Marcus found a job at a construction company, starting from the bottom but working his way up. Shanice enrolled in a medical billing program at the community college. They attended every financial counseling session I arranged, and according to the counselor, they were actually learning. I visited Marcus Jr. every Sunday. I'd pick him up from the apartment, take him to the park, buy him ice cream, read him stories. I got to be his grandfather again, without the baggage of his parents' betrayal. Marcus and Shanice were cordial during these visits but distant. There was no warmth, no real connection. We were bound together only by Marcus Jr. and the legal agreement we'd signed. At the end of the year, Marcus came to my house for the first time since I'd taken it back. He stood on my porch, hat in his hands, looking nervous. "Dad, can we talk?" I let him in and we sat in my living room, newly furnished, newly decorated, newly mine. "The year's almost up," Marcus said. "I wanted to let you know that we're going to renew the lease on your apartment at market rate. I got promoted to foreman at the construction company, and Shanice got her certification. We can afford it now." "That's good," I said. "I'm proud of you for getting back on your feet." "Dad, I also wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything, for how we treated you, for taking advantage of you, for throwing you out of your own house. I was selfish and stupid and cruel, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I looked at my son and saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Not the desperate remorse of someone trying to avoid consequences, but the deep shame of someone who truly understood what they'd done wrong. "I appreciate that, Marcus," I said, "and I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. You broke something between us that can't be completely repaired." "I know," he said quietly, "but maybe over time we can build something new? Not father and son like before, but something honest, something based on respect instead of money." I thought about it, about the years of betrayal and pain, about the lawsuit and the eviction, about the months of anger and bitterness. But I also thought about little Marcus Jr., about watching him grow up with a fractured family, about Margaret, who had always believed in second chances, about the possibility of healing, even if the scars remained. "Maybe," I said, "but it'll take time, son. A lot of time." "I've got time," Marcus said. "And Dad, thank you for saving us. We'd be on the streets right now if you hadn't helped. I know you didn't do it for us, you did it for Marcus Jr., but still, thank you." After he left, I sat in my living room for a long time, thinking. I had my house back. I had my dignity back. I had my grandson in my life. And maybe, just maybe, I'd eventually have some semblance of a relationship with my son again. It wasn't the happy ending I'd once hoped for. It wasn't the close, loving family I dreamed of when Marcus was born. But it was honest. It was real. And it was mine. 3 years have passed since that day in March when Judge Matthews handed down her verdict. I'm 77 years old now, still living in my house, still painting in my studio, still working in my garden. Luther passed away 18 months ago, and I miss him every day. But his children and grandchildren still visit me regularly, and I've become an honorary uncle to his whole family. Marcus and Shanice are doing well. They moved out of my rental apartment into their own house, a small place they can actually afford on their own salaries. Marcus is a construction supervisor now, making decent money. Shanice works as a medical billing specialist at the hospital. They're not wealthy, but they're stable, and more importantly, they're independent. Marcus Jr. is 6 years old now, smart and funny and full of life. I pick him up from school twice a week and keep him on weekends. We've built our own relationship, separate from the complications between me and his parents. My relationship with Marcus is cordial but distant. We see each other at family gatherings, exchange pleasantries, talk about surface things. The deep connection we once had is gone, probably forever. But there's a foundation of respect now that didn't exist before. He doesn't ask me for money. I don't lecture him about his choices. We exist in each other's lives without expectation or obligation. Shanice and I barely speak. She's never apologized for her role in what happened, and I don't expect her to. Some people just aren't capable of that kind of self-reflection. But she's a good mother to Marcus Jr., and she allows me to be part of his life, and that's enough. Last week, I was working in my garden when a car pulled up. My first instinct was caution, old habits die hard, but then I saw it was a young couple I didn't recognize. They got out and approached my fence with friendly smiles. "Excuse me, sir," the young man said. "We're new to the neighborhood, just moved in 3 houses down. We wanted to introduce ourselves. I'm Daniel, and this is my wife Kira." We chatted for a while, and I learned they were both teachers, newly married, saving up to buy their own home someday. They reminded me of Margaret and me when we were young, full of hope and dreams and plans. "If you ever need anything," I told them, "don't hesitate to ask. I've been in this neighborhood for over 40 years, and I know everyone." "Actually," Kira said hesitantly, "we were wondering if you might know someone who does yard work. Our lawn is a disaster, but we're both working so much we don't have time to deal with it." I looked at their earnest young faces and thought about all the lessons I'd learned the hard way. About the difference between helping and enabling. About boundaries and respect. About the importance of letting people solve their own problems while still being a good neighbor. "I'll tell you what," I said. "I'll show you how to maintain your lawn properly, and I'll loan you my equipment until you can afford your own. But you'll do the work yourselves. Fair?" They lit up with gratitude. "That's more than fair, sir. Thank you so much." As I watched them walk back to their house, excited to tackle their lawn project, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My name is Raymond Carter. I'm 77 years old. I was betrayed by my own son, thrown out of my own house, and told to go die in a nursing home. But I fought back. I reclaimed my dignity, my home, and my life. I learned that love without respect is worthless, that family is about more than blood, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions. I learned that I matter, that my life has value beyond what I can provide to others, that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. And I learned that endings aren't always happy, but they can still be good. If you liked my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can continue to share stories like this. Thank you in advance. And you, what would you do in my place? I'd love to hear your opinion, so please share it with me in the comments. I'm always curious about what you all think, and also let me know where you're watching this from. For more life stories like this, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you here. With heartfelt greetings until next time.